All right, good morning, good morning, good morning. We're going to get going here in just a minute. I want to give everybody just a little bit more time to get logged in, and then we'll get right to it. Take a look at the agenda and see what we have going on today. All right, thank you so much for joining in today, folks. Here's what we got going on. We're going to start out with a little Quizlet Live. Get ready for that term. The terms that are going to be on the assessment piece next week. Okay, so this is week one of a 2-week unit on the judicial branch. We'll work more on that unit, that week one stuff today. Next, we're going to watch a little brain pop video. It's only about 5 minutes on the court system. Then we're going to read an upfront article that has a great deal to do with what we're studying right now. It's topical. It is fresh. It's an article just from yesterday, and I'm sure a lot of you already know what the heck I'm talking about. Then we'll break up, meaning I will spend my time with the kids in class here, and the kids release the kids that are online, and we'll spend a little time working on the Unit 7 document. Okay, any questions before we get going here? No? Would everybody go to Quizlet.live right now? There is your code, 201702. Six, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17. 23-ish. So we're missing a handful of you. Give you another 40 seconds or so to get in, and then we'll do this thing. Missing just a couple of you. Give you another 20 seconds here. All right, there are your spirit animals, folks. And here we go. And they're racing. Oh, we're neck and neck. Who's it going to be? Camels or bald eagles? Oh, here we go. Round 2. And they're racing. If you jump in here, we can get you into the last round there. Code is 201702. Oh, just in time. Put that code in real quick. Here we go. We'll get you in the last round. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Bald Eagles in it again. Oh, we're going to play again, but we're going to go back and add. I think we had 22 before, so we need 24. Good. All right. New spirit animals, folks. How exciting. Last round. This one's for all the Tostitos. And there. You can still plug in that code. It'll put you right back in. Those of you that are out. Take Mason, Olivia. And there. Racing. Okay. So short little video here is the next thing on our list. It should go relatively quick. And then after that, we're going to do a little reading together. Here we go.
Has this ever happened to you? If you've been harassed by a cyborg, droid, or automaton, you don't have to put up with it. Dial 555-NOBOT for the law offices of Tim and Tim and get the justice you deserve. Hey, hey! Couldn't you have waited until I was done taping? Dear Tim and Moby, can you tell me about the court system? Thanks, John. Well, being that Moby's destroyed the law offices of Tim and Tim, we might as well answer this. In the United States, there are many kinds of courts, or places where legal cases are heard. And there are two types of legal cases, civil and criminal. Criminal cases are brought by the government against people accused of breaking the law. And civil cases are brought by one party against another. Like, if the two of us signed a contract and you broke it, I might sue you in civil court. Okay, think of it this way. Let's say one person accidentally hits another with his car. If he broke the law, like if he was drunk or driving recklessly, the state might bring criminal charges. And if the accused person or defendant is found guilty, he might have to pay a fine or go to prison. But in a civil case, a judge or jury resolves a dispute without criminal punishment. For example, if the victim was injured in the crash, she could bring a civil case against the guy who hit her. If she won, he wouldn't go to jail or anything like that. But he'd have to pay her for the damages she suffered. Good question. Kids generally don't go through the same process as adults.
If a minor breaks the law, they'll usually appear in juvenile court. A judge decides whether they're innocent or guilty, as well as the punishment.
Robot court? Not so sure about that. Anyway, there are two basic court systems in the United States, state and federal. Every state has its own constitution and laws, and state courts have authority over cases covered by these laws. The vast majority of cases, both civil and criminal, are dealt with on the state level. If they go to trial, they're first heard in state trial courts. In case you don't know, a trial is a hearing where each side argues its case in front of a judge or jury. If the loser of a case isn't satisfied with the court's decision, he can appeal it. That means he asks a higher court to review his case. These higher courts are called courts of appeals. Well, if he loses the appeal, he might still be able to take his case to the highest state court, the state Supreme Court. Appeals courts and Supreme Courts don't have juries. Instead, cases are decided by panels of judges. Right, federal courts hear cases involving laws that apply to the whole country. That includes civil cases that depend on federal law or that involve disputes between citizens from different states. Federal courts also handle federal crimes. These are violations of the U.S. Constitution or of laws passed by Congress. The federal system has three basic levels, just like the state system. At the lowest level is a network of federal district courts divided into 12 regions or circuits. If you lose a case in district court, you can take it to that circuit's court of appeals. And if you're still not satisfied, you could ask the Supreme Court of the United States in Washington, D.C. to hear your case. It's made up of 9 justices or judges. But chances are, they'll say no. They hear fewer than 100 cases a year, and these usually involve far-reaching legal issues. Sorry, once the Supreme Court decides an issue, that's it. It's the highest legal authority in America. Oh, and by the way, you've been served. I'm suing you for the damage you caused to the law offices of Tim and Tim. Oh, fine, I'll drop the lawsuit.
Okay, it's a folder called Upfront Articles, and underneath it you should see something titled Upfront. Former officer is guilty of George Floyd's death. Looks a little something like this. And I like to download it so that I can have a bigger version to read. Very good. Okay. All right. So regardless of how you feel about the case or about where you lie in the political spectrum, pretty hard to argue with the fact that the eyes of the world were on Minneapolis this last week. Yes. I mean, you can't think, you can't look up any station in the world that wasn't at least talking about this in some capacity. So we're going to read this article. Okay. We're going to read this article, and that will be one of the last things we do as a group. So here we go. Former officer is guilty in George Floyd's death. A jury in Minneapolis convicted Derek Chauvin of murder in an incident that sparked worldwide outrage. A jury on Tuesday found Derek Chauvin, a former Minneapolis police officer, guilty of murder in the death of George Floyd during an arrest last year, a killing that sparked worldwide outrage and led to a nationwide racial justice movement. And again, in terms of like social movements, putting this into context with all of the other movements that have ever existed, it's hard to argue with how far-reaching this movement was. Would you agree? I mean, this is one of those events in 2020 that impacted everybody in some capacity. Okay? Floyd's death on May 25th outside a Minneapolis convenience store happened in front of a crowd of bystanders, some of whom filmed it with their cell phones. The video of the incident went viral on social media. Floyd, a 46-year-old African-American man, died after being handcuffed and pinned to the ground under the knee of Officer Chauvin, who is white, for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. In the videos of the arrest, Floyd is heard repeatedly telling Chauvin that he can't breathe. The video, as well as a long history of police violence targeting Black Americans, incited large protests across the United States against police brutality and systemic racism, with millions of people marching in more than 150 American cities in the months that followed. The protests, in turn, prompted a national reckoning over racial injustice. The Minneapolis Police Department fired Chauvin and the 3 other officers involved in Floyd's arrest. The video also prompted an FBI civil rights investigation that is currently before a federal grand jury. Just want to make sure I didn't mute myself there. Here we go. Chauvin, 45, was charged with second-degree murder, which is the killing of someone in the course of committing another serious crime. Third-degree murder, a death that occurs when someone is acting extremely dangerously, and second-degree manslaughter, a death in which the perpetrator knowingly risks death or serious harm to another. It's customary for prosecutors to include multiple charges as a way to give the jury options in case they can't meet the burden of proof for one. The jury found Chauvin guilty on all 3 counts. The jurors, 7 women and 5 men, spent 10 hours over the course of 2 days deliberating while sequestered in a hotel before settling on a verdict. All 12 members of a jury must agree in order to avoid a mistrial. In voting for conviction, jurors must believe that prosecutors have proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt. When the verdict was read, cheers erupted from the crowds of people who had gathered outside the Minneapolis courthouse and outside the convenience store where Floyd died. Many political and civil rights leaders spoke about the significance of the movement in light of the fact that it has been relatively rare for police officers to be found guilty on charges of wrongdoing involving violent arrests of Black Americans. We will forever look back at this moment in history, says Rashad Robinson, president of Color of Change, a civil rights group. George Floyd's death created a new energy around making changes, though it's not clear how lasting they will be. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, who led the team of lawyers prosecuting the Chauvin case, said the jury had done the right thing and called on all Americans to continue working for racial justice. I would not call today's verdict justice, however, because justice implies true restoration, Ellison said. But it is accountability for which is the first step towards justice. And now the cause of justice is in your hands. George Floyd's death has had a profound impact on the national conversation about race. Businesses, schools, and public officials have searched for new ways to address longstanding problems of racial inequality. More than 30 states have passed more than 140 new police oversight and reform laws, according to a New York Times analysis of data from the National Conference of State Legislators. President Biden has spoken about the push for racial justice as a key part of his coronavirus relief legislation and his proposed infrastructure plan. A national police reform bill named for George Floyd is pending in Congress. On Tuesday, President Biden praised the verdict in a nationwide address at the White House, but called it too rare to deliver basic accountability for Black Americans. It was a murder in full light of day, and it ripped the blinders off the whole world to see, Biden said. For so many, it feels like it took all of that for the judicial system to deliver just basic accountability. He called on Congress to pass the George Floyd Accountability in Policing Act, which is currently stalled in the Senate after having passed in the House of Representatives. Oh, does that seem like a theme that we've heard about before? Differences between the House and the Senate. The bill faces strong Republican opposition. It passed the House without any Republicans supporting it. In particular, Republicans oppose eliminating legal protections for police officers that make it harder to charge them with wrongdoing. This change is one of the bill's provisions. President Biden also called Floyd's family after the verdict and told them that he was relieved that the jury had made the right decision. In March, the city of Minneapolis agreed to pay $27 million, among the largest payments of its kind, to settle a wrongful death lawsuit filed by Floyd's family. Wow, that couldn't be more topical about what we're studying right now, could it, folks? Okay, we were just talking about the differences, or the video was talking about the differences between a civil and a criminal case, yes? Okay, so that was kind of a big deal in this case, because right as the criminal trial was starting, the civil lawsuit had been settled for $27 million. Do you guys remember hearing about that? Okay. And they didn't want the civil to impact the criminal. So one side of the political spectrum is saying, oh, wait, that definitely impacted this verdict, because by saying that the civil case had already been settled and that they had already been wrongdoing, could that have impacted the criminal case? Okay. The deadly encounter between Floyd and the police began around 8 p.m. on May 25th when police responded to a call from a convenience store clerk who said Floyd had paid for cigarettes with a counterfeit $20 bill. The police found Floyd outside his car and said he appeared to be under the influence. The county medical examiner ruled the death a homicide caused primarily by the officer's use of force. But he also noted the presence of two drugs, fentanyl and methamphetamine, in Floyd's system and his underlying heart condition. At the trial, several medical witnesses testified that Floyd died from a lack of oxygen, contradicting arguments by the defense lawyer Eric J. Nelson, who sought to tie Floyd's death to complications from drug use and a heart condition. Law enforcement officials, including the chief of the Minneapolis Police Department, said Chauvin violated police policy when he used his knee to keep Floyd pinned to the street. Here we go, last little column here. In his last comments to jurors before they began deliberating, I think it's Schreitler, the prosecutor, argued that Chauvin had acted with cruelty and indifference, unbefitting a police officer, and should be convicted of murder in Floyd's death. What the defendant did was not policing, Schreitler said to told the 12 jurors. What the defendant did was an assault. In the defense's closing argument, Nelson said that there was much more to the case than the moments that had been captured on a cell phone video and seen by the world. Nelson argued that there was at least reasonable doubt about two vital issues: whether Chauvin's actions were allowed under the Minneapolis Police Department's policies, and whether Chauvin had caused Floyd's death. Chauvin's trial lasted 3 weeks. It featured testimony from 45 witnesses and many hours of video footage. Chauvin opted not to testify in his own defense, invoking his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Chauvin was tried separately from the other three former officers who were also involved in Floyd's death. Thomas Lane, To Tao, and Alex King will be tried jointly beginning in August. During Chauvin's trial, protests erupted after the police killing of a black man named Dante Wright in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, about 10 miles from the courthouse. That and other highly publicized police killings, including one involving a 13-year-old Mexican-American boy named Adam Toledo in Chicago, have set off demonstrations in cities around the country. Having been convicted on all 3 counts against him, Chauvin could face up to 40 years in prison when he's sentenced in 8 weeks. After the verdict was read, He was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. His lawyer did not issue a statement, but Chauvin is expected to appeal the verdict. All right. So that was the last thing that I wanted to do as a group. Okay. I did start taking some, no, we can get to that the next time we meet next week, where we've got some notes that I'm formally going to go through here, okay? What I want today to primarily be is for you to get your Unit 6 stuff in if you haven't done so already. I know that there's a good number of you that still need to get that Unit 6 stuff in because you've only got one more week to get that in. Got me? And then I'm not taking it after the next Friday, okay? Yeah. I think that's about all I got for you here, folks. Any questions by the from the people online before I cut you loose?